So breaking news out of the college football landscape, and it has just shaken the college football world. College football will absolutely never be the same again after this announcement. Nick Saban has officially retired from college football as a whole, and more specifically, the University of Alabama. So I usually get these shows out to you guys on Monday, or I guess I should say I film them on Monday. I get them out early Tuesday morning. This week was a little crazy. It kind of worked out because we have a lot of crazy breaking news. So including this Nick Saban news of him retiring from Alabama. I got the news late in the afternoon. I was sitting at work. I was just reading over some documents, and I hadn't even checked my phone for a little bit. So I was a little late to the party in about 10, 15 minutes. But in the social media world, that is hours, that is days. It feels like in the social media world. So I was a little late to the party. And my first reaction when I saw the notification, I'm just like you guys. I have sports notifications, tweet notifications, Bleacher Report notifications. I'm just like you, but with a expensive microphone and a phone for a camera to film these things. So we're just alike in that retrospect. And I saw the news, and I didn't have the same reaction as a lot of people. My friends basically saying, I can't believe that's happened. Nick Saban, he's retiring. That's insane. I saw that on Twitter as well. A lot of people on Twitter going, wow, he's gone. And that's just not the reaction I had. I didn't want to see Nick Saban go. Nick Saban is ultimately great for college football. And personally, to me, college football will never be the same. I grew up with Nick Saban. That, to me, is the GOAT of coaching in college football. I don't think anyone else is particularly close. I'm sure some people would make some arguments for, the legendary Bear Bryant and years and years and years ago. But my reaction to it was, yeah, it makes sense. Nick Saban does not seem like the kind of guy that you're going to have to drag off the court, the field, the baseball diamond to let him know it's time. Nick Saban is extraordinarily smart. Nick Saban is incredibly knowledgeable. He knows the game, and he's probably the only defensive head coach in college football that constantly adapted the right way. If you remember, he was losing offensive coordinators every year, but he's bringing in a new one. He mostly got it right, whether it was the Bill O'Briens of the world or offensive guys like Lane Kiffin back in the day or whatever it is. He seemed to always get it right at Alabama. And to his credit, not a lot of coaches did. But Nick Saban, and I think people forget this because he does look good for his age. Nick Saban is 72 years old. If I'm not mistaken, he's 72 years old. I believe I'm exact with that number. He's at minimum 70 years old. So we'll just call it 70, even though I'm 95% sure it's 72 years old. Nick Saban is not a young gun in this industry anymore. And he's got his rings, one with LSU, a multitude of them with Alabama, Coach of the Year numerous times, has recruited some of the best players over the years. Alabama has more first-round picks in his time as the head coach of the Crimson Tide than he does losses. That is how legendary Nick Saban is to college football. But he's 72 years old. College football used to be the Joe Paternos of the world, the coaches that would literally die on the field, it felt like. Not literally, but figuratively speaking, die on the field. These guys were there forever. Nick Saban is older. He's 72. He understands probably not the same energy for the sport like he used to. Not everyone's Pete Carroll and jumping up in the air and throwing footballs at 70-something years old and acts like 40 even though they're on the wrong side of 70. Nick Saban's old, and it's not a young man's game anymore. This is an industry that is year-round recruiting. You don't get time off as much anymore, if at all, as a college football head coach, especially when you're just building your program. I'm at Arizona. I went to Arizona State University. Kenny Dillingham right now is building a program, and he is constantly working. He's a busy bee. I highly doubt he's taken a nap since he's been here in Arizona, in Tempe, trying to build an organization, a football club that can consistently compete. Nick Saban now is having to compete with the young guys, the Kenny Dillinghams of the world, the Lincoln Rileys of the world, the for better or for worse, the Steve Sarkisians of the world, the Kalen DeBoers of the world. And it's tough. Nick is not getting the number one recruiting class every year unanimously. He's losing them to guys like Kirby Smart, Kalen DeBoer, Steve Sarkisian, the Dan Lannings of the world. This is just the landscape of college football. So what I think happened, and I totally get it, for a guy that's got his rings, that's got his legacy, and is the greatest head coach of all time in college football, I think he just decided enough was enough. Didn't want to keep up with these guys. Still showed that he can win national titles with the transfer portal. Still showed that he can compete for national titles with the transfer portal. Still showed that he can win and beat his assistant who has had the somewhat better of him at his time in Georgia and Kirby Smart. And he kind of went out on top. There's only one champion. So I don't disrespect Nick Saban for not winning the title this year. Jalen Milroe was highly one-dimensional. Nick Saban took Michigan down to the wire. The same Michigan team that clobbered Washington on Monday night. So I get it. It's time for Nick Saban. It's time for Nick Saban to, whether it's going up in the booth, calling games, I highly doubt that would happen. Or maybe he works as an analyst, or maybe he's a consultant at Alabama. But it's a young man's game. The transfer portal, whatever it is, the new college football playoff landscape that will be 12 teams, that's different. Conference realignment. Nick Saban's not going to run the SEC ever again. He just never will. Not possible. It's too many good teams. Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia is always really, really good. Ole Miss this year was better than people thought they were going to be. Just time. And credit to Nick Saban for not being the Joe Paternos of the world that go out sad, and not just because, the Joe Paterno allegations of the world that were obviously terrible, but Nick Saban going off on his own terms. Not everyone does that. Look in the NFL. Bill Belichick is this close to being fired, if not fired by the time this podcast is out. Not many people get to go out on top. Everyone thinks, and that's why everyone's shocked, because everyone knows Nick Saban could still go out there and perform if he wanted to. He doesn't want to anymore. And that's perfectly fine. Nick Saban gave me some of the greatest college football teams that I've ever watched. Some of my favorite battles were between him and Dabo Swinney, his maybe successor to the program at Alabama, in those national championships and those semifinal games between each other. Nick Saban has gave everything to college football. Tip of the cap to him. He's the greatest college football head coach of all time. But he knew it was time. And credit to him for knowing it was time. The transfer portal, conference realignment, the new college football playoff. Nick knew, and everyone knew, he could still compete. But he decided, smartly so, I'm 72 years old. It's time for me to step away, even though I can still do it. It's highly commendable. And thank you, Nick Saban, for some of the greatest years of college football I've ever watched.